Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at upnradio.com.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Rebel Hearts with Christy Reeves. I am excited you're joining us today. And we have another jam-packed, inspiring, and empowering conversation ahead of us. But before I introduce you to today's guest, let me tell you about an amazing company that is based here in Los Angeles. They're actually down in Venice Beach, California. And they make incredible candles. We actually had them on the show a little while ago. And the whole room just smelled amazing. So let me tell you a little bit about them. Bestow It All is based in Venice Beach, and the co-founders have come up with something new and innovative in the candle world. This local company takes home decor to the next level and created more than a candle. It's a curated experience. Bestow It All art and candles are made with eco-conscious materials, soy coconut wax candles with cotton wicks, fine fragrances, and essential oils. The company donates a portion of its sales to the environment and Venice Arts, a community program that provides art education for low-income youth. Go online to the website bestowitall.com, read about the earth-minded practices of the company, and purchase art and candles. Use code REBEL for 15% off your first order. You'll receive a beautiful natural candle with art for your home. And like I said, I absolutely love them. I have their candles at home. They were also part of our swag bag contest a little while ago. And they even have little travel candles that you can take with you when you're not home, when you're going around. So check them out. And let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. I actually had the honor of interviewing her. We were just talking about it. It's been a couple of years that we did the interview series for the Children of the Rainbow, and I'm so excited she's joining us today on Rebel Hearts. Maureen Healy is an award-winning author, popular speaker, and leader in the field of children's emotional health. She also writes a popular blog for Psychology Today and has contributed to the PBS series This Emotional Life. Along with writing, Maureen continues to work with children and their parents globally, especially highly sensitive ones. She is based in Santa Barbara, California, but loves traveling and speaking to parents, teachers, and professionals on the how of children's happiness. And I am so excited she's joining us today. Welcome, Maureen Healy. Woohoo! I'm so excited you're here, Maureen. Thank you so much for coming all the way down from Santa Barbara and joining us here at the studio.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And it's actually interesting how I came across you. I was doing some research for the Indigo Kids documentary series. And what we were finding at that time, there were a lot of books about the Indigos that were written probably about 10 years ago, or even 15 years ago. Lee Carroll was one of them. And then a friend of mine emailed me, he's like, I finally found a newer book on the Indigos, and you need to talk to this woman. And it was you.
That's great. Thank you.
That's how I came across your book. Tell us the title.
It's The Energetic Keys to Indigo Kids was my last book. Yeah. And it was because I was seeing just more and more indigos in my office, and it was time to talk about it again. There's so much had happened in 10 years of their evolution. Yeah. And we're going to talk about who the indigos are in a moment and what they need to become thriving, happy children. Before we get into it, I actually love stories and how your story started. What got you inspired to do the work that you are doing today? What was the initiator behind it, Maureen? Because I never asked you that in our first interview. It's a really big question. I was a sensitive child myself. So at the core of what I do is I want to be the type of person that I didn't have growing up. There wasn't a lot of people around me growing up that were mentoring sensitive children, where I saw other people who are sensitive and balanced both their intuition and logic and were thriving. I saw a lot of people who were really creative and struggling, and then I saw a lot of people who were in business and doing really well, but I didn't see someone who held both the right and the left brain in balance. So I want to be that to younger children, to younger people, and helping their parents. Oftentimes I find that children speak a certain language
Yeah.
and parents speak a different language, and they need someone to translate what they really mean. And so parents get it from a different perspective and can appreciate it. So I find that translation is really valuable because I still see through the mind of a child when I'm working with them, which I feel like is one of my gifts. So I can help that translation. Yeah. And then when you realize what's really happening in the mind and hearts, then you can help them more. You can guide them. You can help them thrive. Because the kids, when they see things, they make these misperceptions. And when you're so young, you don't have the luxury of 40, 50 years of experience.
Yeah.
So you don't realize, okay, this is not that big of a deal. Or, just because grandma died didn't mean she did something wrong. It wasn't like pressing a button. So there's all these little misperceptions that they make that when they begin to realize more of the truth and they have more tools, they can thrive.
Yeah.
So did I answer the question?
Yeah,
that was
you
sort of a
answered the
long
question. Yes,
answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm a highly sensitive child. I was a highly sensitive child. I'm now a highly sensitive adult. And I'm highly sensitive to emotions, to the environment around me, how people are feeling. I can feel what other people are feeling. But I'm also highly sensitive to, say, ingredients in food or chemicals in our cleaning products. If someone uses laundry detergent that is not all natural, I actually use wash nuts or soap nuts for my laundry, I have a skin rash the next day. I am highly sensitive to radiation, all the electricity. That's why I usually wear a shungite crystal. I have shungites all over my house. And I never really knew what high sensitivity was until I was probably my late 20s. And I had never even heard the term high sensitivity or even indigo. But when I came across it, it was like as if a light bulb was going on in my brain. I'm like, oh my gosh, now everything that I've been experiencing and feeling all of a sudden made sense to me. Was it similar for you growing up as a highly sensitive child and then all of a sudden hearing about it, learning about it, that certain things, like you were connecting the dots all of a sudden?
Well, I'll say two things. First is that if you're emotionally sensitive, chances are you're physically sensitive. They usually go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So I was always physically sensitive. So I had allergies. I had all these things that they thought, well, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I met Lee Carroll or I came across people in my path that I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, not only am I weird and different is good, but there's actually a place where there's whole lots of people like me. Because if you don't see someone similar to yourself, you just think I'm strange and I don't fit in. But then when you start meeting other people and finding your groups where you are supported and you thrive, you think, oh, wow, there's other people who are having similar experiences and we can support each other in how we grow, and even down to the practical methods of what makes sense to eat, what makes sense to have candles burning in your home, what makes sense to use for laundry detergent. I can't use any flower essences in my shampoo or I have a horrible skin rash. So it's all these little things that make a big difference, and having people around you that appreciate and don't say, oh, you're overly sensitive or you're this. And it's
judging
just,
you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of we're all different beings on this planet and we're a mosaic and we're here for different, we're all patterned for our purpose. So how do we help each other thrive?
Yeah, exactly. And you are working with a lot of these highly sensitive children, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the things you're finding when, maybe it's a child that has been highly sensitive and maybe considers him or herself weird, or the peer group says, oh my, you're so weird and you're reacting to this and you're saying this. What are you finding is changing in these kids when they come and actually find Maureen?
Right. Well, I guess I would say there's two different types of parents typically that bring them in. There's usually one type of parents, they're like, what's wrong with my child? How can you help? Yeah. There's another type of parent who thinks, oh, my child's great, but we've got an issue. Usually they're coming to me not only to help themselves thrive, but there's something that's come up. For example, I have this extraordinary client she's now 10. I started seeing her at 8. Wow. Her father was in prison. She had all these deep feelings and challenges, and her mom didn't know what to do. The issue that happened was she got so angry in her 3rd grade classroom. They were doing a project about fathers. And the teacher didn't know her dad was in prison. She had all these issues, but she didn't know how to handle her emotions, how to let them out safely, constructively. So she took in 3rd grade a chair and threw it across the classroom. Wow. Well, this is not going to work in school.
Yeah, of course.
So she came into my office. We talked about things. I helped her recognize what's going on. I helped her heal from some of those past upset and develop a mindset that was more skillful and helpful to her. I said, the only thing your dad had to do was get you safely to the planet. You and your mom have it from here. You can meet other people, you can get mentored by other people, but if he doesn't show up in the way that you're in your mind you think he needs to show up, you just have to let that go. He did his job. Yeah. And when she started learning tools, whether it was breathing or taking a break or different things to allow her emotions to release, she didn't have those issues. So it's not that she's still not sensitive. She still sees her guides. At 10 years old now, she meditates.
Wow.
She has a huge crystal collection. She's
I
an
love
extraordinary.
it.
She only wears fairy dresses.
Oh my
still at 10.
gosh.
I mean, she'll be doing something. She's wearing dresses with pants underneath.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
so she's letting herself be uniquely who she is, but now she's doing it with more reason and logic and skills so that she can thrive.
Yeah,
so that's just an example of
Yeah.
a child who's super sensitive, physically sensitive, emotionally sensitive, spiritually sensitive, socially sensitive in large groups, who feels like, oh, I'm a little anxious, nervous, but has learned how to navigate the world and has also learned how to deal with her big feelings. As a small child, their feelings are so big.
Yeah.
So helping them learn that they're bigger than their feelings is a huge aha.
I love that. I love that, learning how they're bigger than their feelings. That's
Right.
Brilliant.
Right? And it's
Yeah,
for adults
yeah.
too, because if there's an adult suffering from depression, and there's a biological cause for that, but there's this misperception that it's bigger than them, and
It takes over, yeah.
you can't manage something or work on something that's bigger than you. You have to somehow muster that even just willingness to see yourself as bigger, even if you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So.
And what do you suggest? Maybe there's parents out there who are listening. Hopefully there's parents listening out there to this conversation might go, oh, my child has all these difficulties, but I don't know what it is. How would you say to a parent, okay, this is how you can actually define or realize or become aware that your child is just highly sensitive and that your child might just need to have some tools in order to know how to handle that sensitivity? How can people become aware of that, parents?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex question, actually. But what I would say is that oftentimes, parents see the behavior. The child slamming the doors, child screaming, child saying something back to them. And they're like, all I asked you to do was do your homework. Like, they don't get, the response wasn't appropriate to the situation in their mind. But learning what's really going on underneath that. I always think of the saying, like, if a child, it's the children that are the hardest to love that need us the most. So when a child's acting out, it's coming from a place where there's a wound or there's big emotions and they don't know how to cope with it. So I like to think of, if you have a child that's reacting to things out of balance. You have to think about, okay, well, what's really going on here? Can I handle this? Do I need to help them? Nowadays in the world, there's workbooks to help children with anger, with frustration, whether they're coming from a divorced house. How do you learn how to manage ADHD? Or, how do you help them focus and let go of the distractions? There's lots of tools that children can learn, but I do believe it all begins with mindfulness.
Yeah.
So if you can put mindful practices into your house of whether it's, a gratitude list at night, whether it's breathing together in the morning, but anything to help them calm. Because a child, like adults, we don't make good decisions when we're not calm. So it always goes back to, how do you let them calm and stop and make better choices? So if your child is making choices that you are not feeling good about, it's how do you, or a counselor, a therapist, a mentor like me, how do you get someone in this child's life who's farther along on the path, who's also a sensitive person? And I wouldn't call it therapy, because therapy is immediately a kid says, like, there's nothing wrong with me, which is true.
And it's creating a label again, right?
It's creating a label, but in their mind they're thinking,
yeah.
It's not me, it's you. And I hate to say it, but oftentimes, it is, that children are always a demonstration of their parents. So you're wanting to help them feel empowered and good on the process of learning about their emotions. And also, they don't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect. So being able to make mistakes and not carry around that baggage of beating themselves up. Oftentimes, sensitive kids, they have this perception. They want things to be perfect because they come from that place that is perfect. And they come to this planet and they're like, what do you mean things aren't perfect here? You know, for example, you'll see a lot of sensitive children when they have a project to draw on the piece of paper. It's not perfect. They go through crumpling and crumpling pieces of paper because they want it to be perfect.
Yeah.
So a lesson is learning how to give your best and let go of the rest.
Yeah, that's what was me, by the way.
Yeah, it still is me. But you have to learn how to manage perfectionism.
Yeah.
You realize there's a place for it because it helps you produce great quality, but it doesn't make you happier.
Yeah.
So you have to let go. You're learning how to walk away from things. So it's a process. But I would say to parents, anyone listening, that you know, if you have a child that's emotions are sort of all over the place, it's really helping them learn how to calm and manage their emotions better. And there's lots of tools to do that. But that's the process. And it's the process for us as adults. So I always like to think of it as a family, whether it's a mother and a daughter, whether it's the whole family, but we're learning together. Whether they institute a peace corner in the house, and anyone, could be mom, it could be dad, it could be brother. Go to when you need a few minutes, you go to the peace corner, you put the headphone on, you read your favorite book, you do whatever you need to do.
I love that.
So you can learn to self-regulate. That I'm not telling you what to do, that you're learning. Mom, you might need 5 minutes in the peace corner. And that's true. So there's a sense of fairness which really works with indigos, that, you know, we're all in it together. When they get that feeling in a household, they're in. When they feel like it's me against mom and me against the school, well, that's a problem.
Absolutely. And then a lot, you know, for me, it was also that empathic skill that was so highly developed. And and even nowadays, I still have to kind of, what you're saying, be mindful several times a day, because I sometimes all of a sudden I feel a certain way, or I don't feel like doing these things, and it's like so subtle sometimes where I pick up someone's energy and then I'm operating on that wavelengths, on that energy, instead of doing what is actually Christy.
Right, absolutely.
And or I'm around people, and then the next day I'm like, oh, I don't feel like doing that. That's not me. I'm like, I hate these things. I'm like, no, but I actually love it. I just picked up someone else's energy, and I just have to clear myself.
Right. And I always think of like young children who are sensitive, that it's always a great activity for them before they go into school to zip up their energy like an aura zipper, or to imagine themselves surrounded in white light, or to ask the angels to come with them in front and back, side to side, top and below before they go to school. Because what happens is with that empath, they can go to school and they don't need to be bullied, but they can observe a bullying situation, take all that energy on themselves, come home and have migraines. So you really don't want them to physicalize, and you want children to begin to learn, where do I begin and where I end, and where do you begin and when you end. And that's a real skill. And for sensitive children, it's a big deal. Yeah,
it is a big deal. It was actually interesting. We did an experiment when I was in Germany. We went to a coffee shop, and we sat at the coffee shop and we started reading people's energy, how they were feeling every day, because we were in this space that was so happy and so light and so joyful. And then during our lunch breaks, we would always go to the shopping area. And to the coffee shops over there, and people would come back and feel heavy after their lunch break. So we sat there for about an hour and just observed people, and at some point we all started laughing. We're like, why is everybody so sad out there? Why is everybody so heavy? Or there was one kid that was chucking down a bottle of diet soda. We're like, why is that kid chucking down? Oh, like it's stressed and it's angry.
Right.
And us coming out of that space of light and energy and high vibration and going out, we all felt drained after our lunch break. And actually sitting there and just observing how people were feeling, it gave us that clarity. I'm like, it's actually not us who are feeling like that. It's our environment. And we really needed to learn how to discern that it was not us. It was where we were.
Right. And I've learned how to not get interested in certain things. I'm being honest. Yeah. Like when you see certain things, it's helpful not to be interested in them, because you could pick up on it. Yeah, you could literally pick it up. Yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned the term indigo.
Right.
And that's actually how we connected, through the Indigo kids. So whoever is listening in who doesn't know what an indigo is, and we're going to talk about the crystals and the rainbow in a moment as well, how would you say this is how you will know your kid is an indigo child? Or you are an adult indigo, because a lot of the indigos are grown up now. What is an indigo, Marie?
Yeah, I would say that just from a high level perspective, we all have different types of energy, and we may be blends of energy. Someone could be part star energy, part indigo energy, part fully human energy, all different types of energy.
Yeah.
So the indigo energy is an energy that holds high sensitivity and fierceness. They hold them together. So they seem like opposites or paradox. There's someone who's incredibly sensitive, but can also say, I will not put my shoes on. I am not going to school today. No, I don't think so. I mean, I remember being younger, and in high school, my parents, I thought their curfew was just a suggestion. I was like, I'm going to come home when I think, it's a hard, that's a hard thing to parent, right? And the indigos by their nature are leaders. So parents who are parenting leaders, I always think of indigos as you have an extra credit assignment from God because they have more intensity to them. Yeah. And they have triggers, right? Yeah. They think if something's unfair, like they hate to stand in line because they hate it because they're from somewhere else where things happen instantly. So standing in line is like, that's really where you need mindfulness practices where, be kind and have courage, like the Cinderella movie, right? Like deep breaths, So they are intense children with great gifts, but they can be considered from a mainstream perspective. People would call them maybe oppositional or defiant or strong-willed or stubborn. And it's interesting. I recently read research. They said, that strong-willed nature, that stubborn nature has proved people who are more strong-willed or stubborn are richer in their lives financially later in life because they hold on to problems. They say, I'm going to get this done. Yeah. But as a child, when your child says, I am not going to school today, there's nothing you can do. It's like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Yeah. So it's difficult to parent early on, but that trait will serve them later on. And that those indigos, they really need a partnership approach. So they need a parent that comes to them and say, let's focus on problem solving. Like, I know you don't want to go to school today. School's sort of a requirement by law. Like, you work on, how can we make this work? So, an authoritarian approach, you just have to put your shoes on and we're going to school. That just escalates the meltdown or the trigger. So learning how to work with indigos is really important. Yeah. And the reason why I see a lot of indigos in my office, whether parents, teachers, professionals call them indigos or not, is because they typically show up either at home or school as the ones who are willing to speak their truth. And that doesn't always fly in the classroom. Like, I don't want to do that math assignment. I want to do it a different way. And then the teacher thinks, oh, we got a problem, And oftentimes indigos learn in a different way. Yeah. They have, like, for example, I find a lot of indigos are auditory processors. So they learn through listening. Like, if they were reading, they would learn through hearing audiobooks versus reading. Like, just forcing them to read slows them down. So they have a different way of being the world. Did I answer the question? It was sort of a long answer.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more because honestly, I'm an adult indigo. And like I said to you, I found out that I was an indigo and that I was a highly sensitive person, but probably when I was around 30. And that opened up, that was that light bulb that went on. And he just described me to a T. I remember when I was in kindergarten and my mom would always lay out my clothes for the day, that what she wanted me to wear. I needed to choose these clothes. And even if it meant wearing winter stockings on Easter and wearing summer dresses around Christmas, I had to make these choices. And I remember, and my mom still talks about that, how stubborn I was. I was highly sensitive, but very stubborn and very fierce.
Right.
And she said, I don't know how many times you were late for kindergarten because we had an argument in the morning what you were going to wear. And at some point, I just gave up. And I'm like, okay, let her wear her summer stockings. Or her summer dresses in the wintertime. So it was that stubbornness that I've always had.
And the willingness to listen to your inner wisdom, like, I don't want to wear that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I had a uniform till I was 18, which probably saved me a few of those arguments, but I would have had them, I'm sure.
Mom, I'm not going to wear this. But you wore the uniform, right?
Yeah. I had no choice.
Yeah. Or my mom said, we would go for a walk in the forest, it would be all peaceful, and you really wanted to turn right when we wanted to turn left.
Right?
Yeah, that's indigo.
Yeah.
And now my mom is like, oh yeah, that's Indigo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're here to pave a new path and often to break down things that don't work and create new things, which means that they have that fierceness that it can be in service of something greater. So when the indigo is in check and balanced, it can be an extraordinary path.
Yeah. And what I also know about the Indigos, we have a really strong BS detector.
Yes.
We know when someone is lying.
You know when you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember being in school, and I don't know if you find that with the kids that you're mentoring, that when I was in school and I had a teacher who was just bored being a teacher, who didn't even want to be a teacher, was just there for the paycheck because it was like a 20-hour per week job at that time. And you get 6 weeks of paid vacation in the summer. I did not want to study for that teacher.
Right.
I could have a subject that would be considered boring, but I had a teacher who was passionate about it and excited. I was studying. I was learning. I was doing even more than my homework for that particular subject. Do you find that too with the kids around you?
I found two things with that.
Okay.
That yes, I have a gut instinct when someone's not totally honest.
Yeah.
And it's humorous because I'll have a child, I remember recently said, oh, I've seen all the Harry Potter movies. And I knew he did not see 7 and 8 or 7 and 7 part A and part B. And I said, so did you see the last movie? Yes. Did you see the last movie? Yes. Did you really see the last movie? And he goes, no.
Okay.
I learned to ask the question three times. Because the first and the second, they teach you in counseling therapy school. But the third, they're going to break. It's the same with adults.
Yeah.
Did you really eat that cookie? No. Did you? And then something happens and they realize they got me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you want to teach kids that, you know, that whole idea of what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
And that, you know, literally, if you want people to be honest with you, you've got to be honest with people, you know, and it's a really important lesson, not only for the classroom, but in life. You know, I think that helping kids realize that they need to be honest, even if it's something they don't want to be honest about. Yeah, I broke that. Say it quickly, say it fast, and get it out of there. Because, you know, the idea, you don't want to, it creates more problems. And I find that indigos want to be really honest, but sometimes that fear, as everyone, it comes up and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. 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 And what would you suggest that, say there's someone listening who has one of these indigo children that are highly sensitive but also come in with that energy of defiance, that stubbornness, that strong will.
Right.
And I feel like there's two things. We want to have these kids have that strong will, have that stubbornness, because it's eventually what's going to help them change the world. It's going to break down the system and make them great leaders. But at the same time, there's still structures, there's still laws that we kind of like going to school that we still have to adhere to. How would you suggest to a parent to talk to their child, or how do you as a mentor talk to these children to help them cope with the structures? And I feel like, you know, just like to extend that question, because as indigos, having that BS detector and seeing through structures that are out of integrity or that are not in alignment with who we are, and we go like, why should I be in this structure that is not in alignment with my true essence? But I have to. So how do you help these kids understand or deal with these things?
Right. Well, I always think that it's problem solving. So say the issue is, I don't want to go to school.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you have to go to school, or I don't want to do my homework. Okay, well, they need choices. All right. The idea is you're going to do your homework, but I'm going to give you a choice when to do it. Do you want to do it now? Do you want to do it after dinner? Do you want to do it before school?
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, I'm not taking the blame. You need to be held accountable with your teacher. So it's not about us saving kids, meaning let me do the homework. I can't tell you how many parents do the homework for their children. And I've been guilty with helping kids myself too, and say, hey, that's the answer. That's the answer. I mean, I've done it myself. But we want them to learn. We want them to take responsibility. But also when there's issues with defiance and stubbornness, I don't think we don't want a power struggle, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We want to partner with them. We want to focus on problem solving. And in life, as we know, we pay our taxes. There's certain things you just got to do. So they need to learn there's certain things they just got to do. And there's a whole huge big piece of the puzzle that's optional, right? Yeah. Do you have to go to archery camp? No. Do you have to go to soccer? No. Yeah. But you want a parent that or a caregiver or a teacher that is willing to work with you. That there's a bunch of things that are required, but then there's a lot of things that are flexible in how you do them. Indigos do well in educational systems that honor who they are and honor creative approaches. Meaning, if they were at a school that said, you're learning XYZ today, and this is the only way you can do it. That would not feel right to them.
Yeah.
But if someone said, hey, we're learning Spanish, and the homework assignment is to do a book report on a small book or pamphlet you read in Spanish, find any way you want to do it. You can draw the book report, you can write it with words, you can do it in audio, like be really creative, but the whole point is for you to learn some Spanish, some conversational Spanish. Then they would be like, great. Because it sparks, they're so innovative and creative that if they get to tap into that in the problem-solving process, they're in.
Amazing.
So if somehow their creativity is shut off, that's their frustration. That's the anger that can get misdirected and can cause problems.
Yeah. I love that. And let's talk about the differences, because we just explained who the Indigos are and what their characteristics are. And then the next, I feel like the Indigos are the oldest. So the next wave that came in were the crystals. So what are the crystal children? How can we, know we have a crystal child?
Well, I would say a crystal is probably one of the most sensitive types, blends of energy or types of people, children, parents, adults. And they know they're crystals because they're uber sensitive. And they're one of the markers that they're sensitive to their environment. So these are the children that want things just so in their bedroom, that need everything just the way it is, that if you move the rug in there, they're like, what happened to the rug? You moved the rug? They don't miss a trick. They're so keenly observant. But the crystals are not only extremely sensitive to their environments, meaning home and school. So picking a school that works for them is going to be pivotal to their physical, mental, emotional health.
Yeah.
And they are often empaths. They take things on. So, and the crystals are often healers. You would know a crystal because they're so sensitive and usually have these big eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these eyes that are like, wow. and you think, oh, there's something really there. So they're one of the highest level of sensitivity, but they don't have... They're more harmonious, meaning they don't have necessarily that indigo fierceness that says, I will not. They may not do something, but they're not going to say that to your face. They're going to find a harmonious way to do it. So they're oftentimes the healers on the planet.
Yeah. And then the rainbow children came in, right?
So tell me about that, because I don't, in my mind, call them rainbow children, but I think of children who are... don't hold the fierceness, but aren't the sensitive ones like the crystals. Yeah. But then there's a new wave of just incredibly sensitive children. So
from what I know, what I've witnessed is kind of the Indigos. We're the trailblazers. We're like, you know what? Let's whip out our swords or the weapons that we're using, and we're going to create this trail for the rainbow children to come in. And what I found about these rainbow kids that are coming in, they're kind of like the Indigos, but they don't, and they have some of that warrior quality as well, but they don't have to whip out the sword as often because the Indigos have blazed the trail for them. And they're often also born to Indigo parents. So they have a different support structure already. And from what I've been witnessing, a lot of these rainbow kids are actually at a young age creating changes. We just did an interview with someone who's 19 who started a foundation when he was 9, and its foundation planted 14 billion trees worldwide. Those are the rainbow children, or these kids that we see who are 9 years old with their vocal cords fully developed, or who are creating scientific breakthroughs. There was one girl, she's in Turkey, and she found a way to create fossil fuel out of banana peels.
I love it. So I hear what you're saying. And from my perspective, these are it's the next wave of sensitive children and sensitive beings coming onto the planet. And I think that what you're saying, I've noticed myself, which is the level of innovation and creativity, and also their level of not putting up with BS.
Yes.
With a lot of Indigos put it up with it. It was like, I don't have a choice. I have to go to that school. Nowadays, it's like you can go homeschooling, you can go charter schooling. With the internet and the expansion of what's possible, there's really no limits. And children are doing things, like you're saying, earlier and earlier and earlier, which is extraordinary.
Absolutely. And I feel like, again, my generation of Indigo children, yes, I had that warrior energy, or I didn't want to study for certain teachers, or like some of the subjects I had to study were so useless. I'm like, why should I study these things? Why should I spend all this time and energy studying chemistry, which is a subject I hated in school? And I'm like, I'm never going to use this again. Yes, I can understand that I should learn languages. because I had to learn English, French, and Italian in
Right.
school. I'm like, I can understand that, so I can communicate with people. But then, again, this is the Indigo energy. If we all spoke the same language, we didn't even have to take languages at school. Wouldn't that be much better? So I was always arguing at home with my mom or dad, but mainly with my mom. She was the one who always had to talk to me why I actually had to study. I always had, but I would study because then, the authority that was the teacher or the authority that was around me outside of my parents' home was an authority that I in a way obeyed a little bit more because I didn't want to get in trouble in school and I didn't want to have bad grades.
I have a funny story about that. I didn't take chemistry in high school. It was required, but I spoke to the principal and I said that I promise you I will never use this. I said, what can we do here? So I actually, at that young age, we came up with a creative answer. She goes, well, if you're willing to do this class, you can write your own class about the suffragists and learning about the feminist movement. I said, I'm in. So even in a Jesuit school in high school, we came up with a solution, which is the way to problem solve. Because I was like, I went to her, I said, I promise you. Because my brain wasn't geared toward that at that time. And I was like, how much do I need to suffer in school? Like, I was like, what's really the goal here?
Yeah.
Like, we're not learning about checkbooks and cooking and all the things that really would have been useful. You want me to cut open a frog? I'm not going to do it.
No.
I didn't. I got a free pass from that.
That's amazing.
But nowadays, I think there is in many places, not in all places, a different level of sensitivity to appreciate, like, we do have all these unique paths. So how do we honor them?
Yeah. I love that you did that in high school.
Oh, yeah, my parents did too. Well, I also have to, full disclosure, my great aunts were nuns and they knew the principal, so I knew I wasn't going to get in trouble for doing it.
Okay.
But nonetheless,
Nevertheless,
I was like, come on.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous, but that's so Indigo.
That's so Indigo, right? And to actually have the courage to speak your truth at that young age.
Right.
And that's what we see in these Indigos, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's that new energy, that new, if you call it rainbow, but the new kids who are like, you know what, I'm forging my own path and I see everything that's possible and I don't feel like wasting time.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I think you totally hit the nail on the head over there where these kids are like, yes, I'm 9 years old or 10 or 11 years old, but why should I wait until I have a college degree to do the things that are exciting for me, that I'm passionate about, and that it can also create a change in the world? Why do I?
Right.
And also for me, what I'm seeing with these kids, and I feel like there's a little bit more in our generation. I feel like in our generation started fading out where we felt we needed to have that piece of paper in our hand as a permission slip to do the work we're supposed to do in the world. No matter if it's a high school degree or college degree or some kind of license that we had to get. And these kids don't need that anymore. They're kind of giving themselves permission and not getting the permission by an institution or some kind of exterior authority.
They've got the degree from God. I mean, really, in many, I mean, I have a lot of education, but I'm not necessarily for just going to school. I think if you go to something, you need to develop, you need to get a deepening of knowledge. But you don't go to college to get loans, to just mature and come out being like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, I'm a real believer in if you know you want to be a stained glass artist, apprenticeship in high school or develop the tools and skills you need. But which is what these kids are doing. They're saying, hey, I have the tools, I have the skills, I can learn. And if college is part of my path, perfect, great, wonderful. I'm all for learning. But I don't like seeing people doing it just to do it, I guess is what I'm saying. And they're not doing that anymore, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting going back to the young man that we interviewed, the 19-year-old who planted the trees. He actually, before he even started his organization, it started with this report he had to do for school anyway.
Right.
But he actually became so passionate about doing that report that he educated himself. And then when they had raised enough money, they actually hired experts to do the research for the organization about how many trees we need to plant and where they could be planted in order to counter the CO2 emissions on this planet. But it was like a self-driven education that was spot on with his passion and his vision for a better world.
And that's what I'm getting from you as well, is thinking about these children, is they recognize who they really are earlier, so they're able to live that. Where a lot of people have gone sort of this bumpy path of power, was like, my parents wanted me to be a XYZ, so I did that. And then I realized I wasn't happy, and I went in another direction. So these kids are coming in more connected and not allowing them to disconnect, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great.
I love that. Yeah, that was the perfect explanation. Thank you.
We're doing it together.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit more about your mentoring program, because you're mentoring kids all over the world right now.
Yes.
So tell us about it. Maureen.
Usually via Skype, I mentor children. I was just on a call with someone from the UK, but I do it with people all over the world. And it's really just to help children not only heal from upsets and develop a positive mindset, but to use coping skills and to learn how tools that work for them to manage their energy, and also to, plant the seeds of happiness. So to help them move up the scale of happiness and move towards their own unique greatness and bring that into the world. Depending on the culture, there's some cultures that really respect and get sensitive children, and even some school systems, and other cultures that are like, what's wrong with your child? So it's really supporting the child and also supporting the parents. So typically I spend time one-on-one with the child and then one-on-one with the parents. So giving them new tools, new support, new assistance to help them move forward. And it's in the service of harmony, right? Because if there are oftentimes indigo children, there's either sadness or frustration or anxiety or conflict. There's something that's come up, and it's helping them learn and see themselves, right? Oftentimes I find elementary age children, they don't have a correct self-perception. So they don't really realize how great they are and how valuable they are. And sometimes, for example, with friends, they'll pick a friend. They're like, I wanted to hang out with those kids. Those are the cool kids. I'm like, yes, but do they treat you nicely? And then they think about it. Not really. I go, well, a friend treats you nicely. They can have a bad day. We can all have a bad day and apologize. But friends are good to you. They lift you up. They help you laugh, And then when kids really begin to learn what a friendship is and how do I make friends, and we do some role playing, they can move forward and make better choices.
Amazing.
Because everything is about making better choices. So that's really how I help guide them as a sensitive person who was a sensitive child, giving them the experience, the tools, sometimes the healing and the coping skills, and just helping them form a mindset that's really going to serve them.
Yeah, and you're working with people all over the world, and you've traveled to quite a few places around the world. Is there anything that you found, okay, this is a through line that I see no matter what culture or what religion, what part of the world these kids live in?
Everyone wants to raise happy children.
Okay.
I mean, that's inborn. Even, whether it's the language, even if it's, a parent might say, I ordered a doctor, but I got a guitarist as a child. There might be something, but they want that child to be happy. Everyone in every culture wants to raise a child not only to be happy and emotionally positive, but happier meaning something within them is really feeling joy, and they're going to live a meaningful life. So parents want their kids to live a life where they get to have positive relationships, where they get to contribute their gifts, whether they get to be self-reliant. There's this wish that not only they have positive connections and take care of themselves, right, but that they can go forward into the world and really bring their joy. Because, we're at our core joy. It's all the other stuff that we've got to sort of unlearn and take out when we've got we become socialized here. So every culture, whether it was me living at the base of the Himalayas or next year I go to Bhutan, people want their children to feel valuable and loved and really supported in the world and to live their joy. And depending upon the culture, that may translate into different things. But at the heart, they want their children to be happy. And of course, it's sort of an unborn thing. You want your children to have an easier time than you had and to have things that you don't have. You want that. That's natural.
I love that. And talking about being in different cultures, such as living in the Himalayas or, all these other cool places that you traveled, is there anything that you learned from these cultures where you go, okay, this was so awesome and so cool and so brilliant, how these parents are raising their children and how they're raising them differently compared to how we're raising them in our westernized world, that you're passing on, that you're teaching to your parents, to the children? Is there anything that jumps out right now?
I mean, there's something that jumps to mind that was personally striking for me. I was working in a clinic in Howard Beach, Queens. So I was working with children and that came in that had serious issues occurring in their lives. And I was frankly tired of all the medication and the way that the Western psychology at the time wasn't very focused on positive psychology. So it was looking at what's wrong with these kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was focused on what's right with these kids. How do we make that part better?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
But that was when I originally went to India. And I observed lots of families. I did some work in a kindergarten there. And it's interesting because their culture, after they have a child, a baby, they bring it home, and the first place they introduce it to is the family altar. And they say, that's the first place when they come home from the hospital, they say, you will need this more than anything.
Wow.
So they have a different perception. You first are a spiritual being here, and we're going to help you develop that part of your life. And then, we're going to guide you on the physical level. But there's where in the West, it's often like we're physical, and then we go to the spiritual. So it was just a different perspective that I personally found valuable because I'm a very spiritual person, meaning I do my best to develop my spiritual life. So that was really exciting for me. But, you go to the kindergarten and the same child that has the same name as the Dalai Lama is still the same kid making Legos, is building a gun. So we all have these impulses, whether it's aggression or fight. We all have the same growth. But I thought that it was just a beautiful thing to say to this child. I was like, okay, you're a spiritual being. We honor that. We want you to cultivate your spiritual life first and foremost. And I thought that was just, to me, it was very heartwarming.
I love that. Yeah, I got chills all over my body as you're talking about. I'm like, what a beautiful thing to do,
right?
From and it's the learning or the unlearning these children have to do depending what they learned, right? Even prenatal stages,
right.
Yeah.
And it's a different perspective than saying, hey, I know everything. You're in my life now. You're my child. It's more of saying like you're a child of God and I'm here to be your guide. Yeah. There's a different shift, Yeah.
And you talked about earlier when you work with children, you also work with their parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I love working with parents because, sometimes they have one child, but sometimes they have many children. So it's when you shift the way a parent parents or it gives them more tools or a new perspective, it's so helpful to them. And it's very rewarding to me. And I just find that we parent the way we were parented.
Yes.
Unless we take a conscious pause and say, okay, what did my mom do right? Really well? What do I want to keep? Or what do I let's discard the spanking. Yeah. Let's no longer use a wooden paddle. That was not ideal. But what can I use that I took from them? Like for my parents, we always had a family dinner. It was non-negotiable. And I loved it. It gave me those moments of daily connection. Yeah. And that doesn't work with every family, but maybe once a week or, the little rituals and practices that really can help.
Yeah, I love that. And again, you just said something that is so important. We parent the way we were parented. But, we are also living in a different time. And every single person is so different. And to actually honor the uniqueness of each and every single one.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, in order for us to be the most effective being parenting a child or teaching or guiding a child, we have to really have that pause and say, okay, what worked and what didn't? Because like you said, we're in a different time. We know more. We can do better now. There's more information. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, like, when I was growing up, probably similar to you, it was like if there was a roof over the head and food on the table, they were really good parents. And my parents were good parents. Yeah. And now, though, we have a different focus. We're focused on the inner life of the child. How do we help you become confident and resilient and gritty and happier and give you the tools that you need to thrive on this planet? So for me, that's a wonderful place to be in that space.
That's amazing. What inspires you most about the work you're doing, Maureen?
Well, I love when I've seen a child that I've worked with, or when I hear a story that someone's read one of my books that has had some sort of a setback, and then they use some of the tools that I shared with them or our experiences, and then they have a happy comeback. To me, that's very rewarding because I started my career working with CEOs.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you that.
No, I don't think you ever told me that.
And they started acting like children.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I thought, why aren't I working with children? So I actually went back to school and started working with children because I realized that when you work with someone young and they're malleable and they can change a lot, that you're really changing the director of their lives.
Yeah.
So for me, when I hear that a child that has really healed from an upset and has used some tools and knows how to handle their emotions with more skill. That's like all warm and fuzzy for me.
Yeah.
So that's I think I answered your question.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I love that. And you've written 2 books so far.
Yes.
And you brought them for us. And I think we can also throw them up on the screen, right? The Energetic Keys to Indigos. You want to just hold them up real quick? And Growing Happy Kids. And you're working on another one right now. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing.
I'm
Is it
excited.
okay?
Yeah, my new book, which I'm on a deadline to write for January. But it is about really the how of children's happiness. So it's about that beginning step of how do you help children begin to master their emotions? So how do you help them stop and calm and make smarter choices? How do you deal with anger and frustration and anxiety and sadness and all the things that, we wish we had a guidebook. Like when you have a child that's really angry, it's like, what do I do? And it's really disconcerting because when you're parenting a child, say it's a 7-year-old, you're really reparenting your own inner 7-year-old. So depending upon how you were parented, it's bringing up issues.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have an objective piece of information.
Yeah.
Teach these tools, do these things. It will help, I promise.
Amazing. I'm so excited about your new book coming out.
Thank you. So it's not only for sensitive children, it's for really any children to help them become emotionally healthy, to get on that path. And I did write a social and emotional learning curriculum called Seeds of Happiness. So a lot of it has a lot of similar tools. So it's the type of work, it can be used at home or the classroom, which is what I love.
Yeah.
Because when I went to school, we didn't learn about the inner life. It wasn't on the table, really. It was just like, do your math and your English and come back tomorrow. Which is fine. But now that we know more, there's more mindfulness in the classroom, there's more emotional health, and I love that. To me, that is an extraordinary breakthrough in education.
Yeah. I just have to put this in before we close up over here. There is a kid, and I'm totally spacing up on his name right now, but we'll put it in the show notes. And he was asked what he wanted to be when he's a grown up, and he's like, I want to be the same thing I am right now, happy. And why are we not teaching that in school, how to be and stay happy? And it was like he gave this little lecture, this little speech. I think, Logan LaPointe, I think I'll get the correct name. But it's exactly what you're saying. Let's bring that mindfulness. Let's teach kids how to be happy. Yes, it's important to learn how to do your math and your English and some other things and maybe even chemistry, even though I never understood why.
If it calls to you.
But it's also important to educate our children and ourselves as adults who never learned that unless we went on that spiritual path, how to be and stay happy.
Absolutely. And, if you think about it, when you're, and all the science and scientific studies show that if you're a happier person, better outcomes, better.
Yeah.
So it's really
amazing.
It bleeds into every part of your life, and happiness is contagious. We know when you're by someone who's like happy and joyful, you're like, I feel great.
I know, we're having a very happy time here doing this interview. And if someone is so inspired, they can find your books online, and then how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. You can go to growinghappykids.com or highlysensitivekids.com, and they can find online classes and free chapters of my books, and there's some free interviews, and that's where they can find me. So I'm really excited and delighted to connect with people.
And if someone would like to work with you, just get in touch with you through one of the websites.
Absolutely.
Per email, and
it
then
comes
just
all
figure it
to
out.
me. Well, for my people and me, I will find it, and I will speak to you directly. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I love it. I guess I would just say that it doesn't take a long time to shift things. There's this misperception that, oh my gosh, how long is this? It's so oftentimes these short little things that move someone in the right direction.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Maureen, for all the inspiration. I hope everybody who's listened is as inspired as I am after this hour talk that we had over here. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and knowledge and the happy energy.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And everybody who's listened, we see you again next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. And in the meantime, remember to rebel on.
Shows that make you laugh. Shows that make you think. Music that moves you. It could only be one place. Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.